Welcome to Western Wisconsin Journal. Today, my guest is Jill Tammen. She's been a friend for many years. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in English and a Master's in Education. I would just love to talk to her about language arts and books. And I just have to tell the audience that we first met when we both taught at the middle school. I mean, we were colleagues for many years, but didn't know each other that well. And then later, you went to the high school, and then I ended up at high school for a few years. So I really feel like I know you really well, and I just have never talked to you at length about books. So this is going to be a fun interview for me. So let's start with, would you tell us a little bit about your degree and what led you to teach English language arts in the Hudson schools?
Well, I always knew I wanted to teach from a pretty young age because I really like the world of ideas. And initially I thought I was going to be a math teacher because my aptitude was actually math, much more than language. And when I started college, I was doing all the coursework for a math degree to teach math. And it wasn't until the end of my sophomore year that I had a sort of eureka moment where I was loving all my English classes. This is the advantage of going to a liberal arts school. And I thought, yeah, you may be good at math, but if you want to teach, shouldn't you teach what you love rather than what you find comes easily? So I switched on a dime, and the rest is history.
Oh, and I've just always known you as an English teacher. And I've always admired you for that too. So what inspired your love of reading?
Disclaimer, I knew this question was coming. I thought about this quite a bit, and the really lovely little seed that I remember is that when I was in second grade, I was in a combined classroom. A third of the students were second graders and 2/3 of the students were third graders. Must have been an incredibly challenging time for the teacher. Once a week, we'd go to the library and get to pick out a book, and we'd be given a half an hour to read quietly at the tables. And you can imagine with all of us. I was at a table with a girl who I thought was just wonderful because she was a year ahead of me and she was so cool. And she was reading a Betsy and Beezus book, I think. And she was laughing out loud and getting in trouble. And I thought, I want to read like that. I want to find out what that's about. And I don't know that that's the only thing that inspired me, but I remember that. And I was an only child, so I had a lot of time to myself. And I was a little bit of a sensitive kid, never bullied or anything terrible, but I just felt safer in books. So I've been reading my whole life.
That's so great. And I know you suggested things for many, many people, including me. And I do know that in your retirement, you have been working at Valley Bookseller. And this is a cool question. You suggested this one. How does that compare with working as an English teacher?
Well, the differences initially are that I don't have to sell reading. The people come in wanting to read, and they're already usually hooked on books. There are a few parents pushing their kids, but I mean, at the high school and middle school level, probably half of my students, I was selling the process of reading as much as I was encouraging them to read the certain book. So it's a whole different kind of focus. Another difference is that I can't just fall back on my knowledge of books because there's new stuff coming out all the time. And it's impossible to keep up, but we do our best to read and read and read and read new stuff. And you have to really love to read to work in a bookstore. And I guess another difference is everybody in the bookstore feels like they're readers, that they share my passion. And even though schools are academic environments, not everybody in a school shares your passion for reading. some of them think we're weird, So those are differences. The similarities are I have to wear a name badge, just like I did at the high school. I learn a lot from the people I serve, like I learned from my students. And it's also sort of like a community center, the way a high school is. One of my coworkers met her husband in the coffee shop behind our store. And it's all one building. So it's more than just a place to go buy stuff. So I don't know if that answers the question completely.
No, it does. And I just never would have thought of that comparison. So I really appreciate your suggestions as we collaborated on our question format. So now our theme for today is books for pandemic reading. I kind of chose that, but you went along with it really well with me. So my question is, what have people been reading during the past months of being so much at home? And maybe another question, what have you been reading? I really want to hear that one, but let's start with people that come into the store or whatever. What are they reading?
Well, let's say, first of all, that we weren't open to the public until about the middle of June. We were selling online, so we didn't have discussions or conversations. But initially, people just wanted to read anything. They wanted to fill time. They found media exhausting because they'd been holed up for so long. Few of them admitted they didn't mind the pandemic because they had more time to read, which is the way readers can be. So we were selling mysteries. William Kent Kruger, who's local, very popular. Another one that of my favorites, Louise Penny. She's a Canadian mystery writer. Because if you fall in love with those characters, they're really good, fun, lickety-split reading, Others, series, like the Outlander series, that's now on cable TV, or like Pillars of the Earth, things like that, where wide ranges of things, but I read the first one, now I can read the second one, now I can read the third one, so on. However, after the violence this summer in Minneapolis and other cities, people were clamoring for books on race. And for example, White Fragility, which was written 20 years ago, has been sitting, with dust on the shelf for years. The Color of Law, Just Mercy, those are just some titles. And the demand for them got so much that we had to sort of set up a separate corner in the bookstore for them, because we don't have a section on race. You know what I mean? We have nonfiction, history, memoir, but all of those, depending on the author and the focus. So that was a big thing through the summer. And I know at least one of our customers thought we were overdoing it. And I've thought about that for a long time, because I suspect it felt like we were encouraging something, but we were really just trying to make the books available because so many people wanted to read about it. And then, of course, as the election ramped up, there was some of that, lots and lots of books coming out. But readers responded hot and cold to that. Some people wanted to read everything that came out, and others were just overloaded and wanted nothing to do with any more political reading. And then, so more recently, I've had a lot of people coming in just asking for escape books, something that's funny and light and entertaining. One of my favorites is The Rosie Project. It's an Australian book about a guy trying to find a wife. And readers of The Broken Wheel recommend Frederick Bachman's books. He's A Man Called Ove and Beartown. A lot of stuff like that right now. So that's what people have been reading, in my estimation. I mean, everyone has their choices. For me, initially, I've been reading books written about and written by people of color. And I'm trying to find two that stand out, fictional for me. One is Girl, Woman, Other, which I just finished. And this one is British. She won the Booker Prize for this, which is a huge award. It's a series of vignettes about women of color in England with all different kinds of backgrounds, and their lives intertwine a bit. And it's just fascinating. And another one, this is a contemporary one from the States. It's called Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. And it's mostly about a Black nanny, but it's also tracing her white employer. And it introduced me to all kinds of cultural references that were brand new to me. It was really fun and a really good read. And among the nonfiction ones that I read that had to do with race, The Color of Law, which traces how the Federal Housing Association subsidized white housing at the exclusion of Black housing for years and years and years. And that was just eye-opening for me. So that was kind of a bent, and they're all wonderful reads. They're even, nonfiction ones. Now, most recently, I've just finished a memoir, just nothing to do with race. I do read plenty of other stuff, called The Opposite of Certainty. And it's a memoir of a mother's journey through a life-threatening event with her son. And it's really a story of a lot of things, but she focuses a lot on her faith, hence the opposite of certainty, because so many of us who are people of faith are certain of things, and how this shook that up. Anyway, it's about faith, marriage, dysfunction, success through a really hard time of struggle. So it was an excellent read. So those are the ones that I've been reading.
Oh, you right away went to mysteries, and I have to tell you, that is what I have been living on for years, is, a mystery, be it on TV. And then sometimes the books that go on TV or a movie eventually are the ones that appeal to me a lot. But sometimes I'll watch the movie and then I'll go back. So what do you think of that? Is that kind of a good way to do it? Or
I don't think there's any perfect way. One of my favorite books that I mentioned in a question you're about to ask me that I know about, is News of the World. Oh, yeah. And it's historical fiction set in post Civil War Texas. And Tom Hanks just came out on Christmas Day, starring in a movie based on this book. And I haven't seen it because I'm chicken to go into theaters yet. And as far as I know, that's the only way I can see it. I have been recommending this book ever since I read it a couple of years ago. And it's one of those sleepers. Every time I recommend it and sell it, they get it again, but we never have more than one copy in this store. So when people come in and they say, "What's a good book?" I say, "You should read this. It's such a rogue story of an older gentleman who's asked to return a young white girl to her family, and she's been raised by the Indians. And it doesn't fit any stereotypes." So in that case, I'm nervous to see the film because I love and admire Tom Hanks, but the trailer that I've seen looks like it changes the setup of the story and changes a few things that I found really, really good about the book. So, you never know. I have a few movies that I thought were better than books, believe it or not, but usually I try to read the book first and then see the movie.
Well, and then I have trouble with violence, and I hate to say it, but I don't know. I saw the trailer, I read the synopsis, and then I thought, that's not for me.
The Tom Hanks version?
I got a little turned off by it, thinking about there's a little bit of violence in there.
Well, I'll be honest, the third book, the series Mockingjay.
Oh, yes.
The third book of the Hunger Games.
Yes.
After I finished the book, I told myself I didn't want to see the movie because it was really, really violent. And sometimes I know that directors and script writers tweak they have to tweak books. They have to shorten them. But Hollywood rarely cuts violence.
Oh,
They often cut sex scenes or language if they want to appeal to a younger audience.
yes.
But they rarely cut violence. And like you, I have a hard time with violence in film. So
Yeah. I really can't take it. And then I also find like the psychological movies are not for me. And I don't know if you can, I don't know if that equalizes with the books or if they've changed it or what happened. But, you know, from somebody who read Bambi and saw that as my first movie, I've come a long ways to be able to take some of these stories.
right, haven't we all?
But then, are you into Game of Thrones?
Both of my kids are, and I will probably someday read some of them because I often will do that just so I have a sense of it. I did that with the vampire series.
Oh,
Um,
see, I'm afraid of that one too.
well, that's pretty light. It's pretty tame. And I read the first one or two, and it was good enough reading,
Yeah.
but not enough to compel me to finish.
Well, and then just to mention PBS, they often have the shows and the mysteries, and like I'm into Sherlock, and I hope that comes back. And those kind of shows appeal to me a lot. So, but I don't know if they're all made from books either. I'm not that into
A
it.
lot of those aren't, but it varies. Usually they'll tell you in the credits.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'm into a lot of that kind of stuff. And what you first said during the interview, you talked about escapism. That's what I'm looking for now. I don't know if I could get into anything that's real heavy about African American race or anything, because it came so close to home. You know, in Hudson, it was just a little, 21 miles away, I think, or whatever. But it just really affected me after a while because it kept going on and on and on. And of course, we're meeting a few days after the problems at the Capitol. So I'm also thinking about things like that. But so anyway, I have to get into a little more happy stories. I kind of like a good ending. But then one time I was reading a book and it was all wonderful. It was about a family that grew up in Iowa. And all of a sudden, chapter 5, one of the children died. And you know what? I had to put it down. I didn't want to read anymore. And it got really bad after that because I did pick it up till the end. But anyway, now what I want to hear about, it was kind of fun to share with you though, Jill, because I hardly ever get to talk to you one-on-one. You know, we're always with our friends who we love. But anyway, we have time for this. What are your favorite books?
Okay. I warned you ahead of time that I have a lot.
Yeah.
What I did when I knew this question was coming is I sort of categorized, because I'll read anything. If someone tells me it's worth it, I'll give it a try. But the categories that I tend to read the most are historical fiction, memoir, nonfiction about the natural world, classics, which I'd leave to the last because I don't have to say anything about those if I mention them. And I'll put in a category I call quirky, because I like quirky books. So under historical fiction, my favorite probably, is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, set in occupied France with two sisters responding very differently to the war. Another one that I love is Pillars of the Earth, and the whole series by Ken Follett, although I haven't read the prequel yet. And this is set in a fictional town in England, building of a cathedral, etc. It's fabulous. Rascal by Sterling North, and he's a Wisconsin writer, and it's semi-autobiographical about growing up and having a pet raccoon, but it's a lovely historical fiction. News of the World, which I already mentioned. There's a book called A Town Like Alice, which is based in Australia, and that's during and post World War II. And I have an affection for Australia, so that one.
I know you've traveled there.
Yeah. One that's just people are reading again, that is called The Street by Ann Petrie, and that's set in Harlem in the 40s. And then lastly, I don't really know if you can call this historical fiction anymore because it's almost an American classic, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which is rough reading because it's, the experiences of the Vietnam War. But this is the only copy I have of a first edition signed by the author. I think it's amazing. So those are my historical fiction picks. Memoir, if you didn't read it for Valley Reads last year, or I think it was last year, Lab Girl by Hope Jaron is a fabulous, she's a Minnesota-born writer, and she's a biologist, and it's her journey to her PhD and all kinds of interesting things that happened to her.
What was her name?
Hope Jaron.
Oh, okay.
And that's really good. Anything by Anne Lamott, and some of hers are fiction, but a lot of hers are memoir and autobiographical. There's a book called Liars Club by Mary Carr, Growing Up Scrappy in Texas. Prague Winter by Madeleine Albright. And that's her childhood. That's a dense and really good historical overview of the times. And a new one that just came out, Next Year We'll Be Laughing. This Time Next Year We'll Be Laughing by Jacqueline Winspear. And she's the writer of a mystery series I like. And that's a really cool memoir. Nonfiction, if you've never read it, you really should. This is by Aldo Leopold. He's a Wisconsin naturalist, and he's gone now. Sand County Almanac, he was well before his time. And his essays about the land and his love of a certain place in Wisconsin are just poetic and inspiring. And another one that's much more recent called Braiding Sweetgrass. This writer is a PhD botanist and a full-fledged member of the Potawatomi tribe. And her essays about teaching students and then the history she knows of her people and how they overlap are remarkable. This has been on our bestseller list for the Midwest indie bookstores since I've been at the bookstore, and that's over a year. And it was published like 10 years ago. So it's an amazing book. Another one which also fits quirky that's really lovely is called The Soul of an Octopus. And it sounds just crazy, but it's literally about getting to know some of the octopuses, I don't know if I said that correctly, in an aquarium in New York. And they have personalities. It's cool. Now, do I have time for quirky?
You do.
Okay.
We have a few more minutes.
Good Omens by Neil Gaiman, and pretty much anything by Neil Gaiman I love. You got to have a strong faith if you're a Christian when you read this one, because he tears apart some of the Christian predictions of the end of times. But it's a romp, and it's amazing. I just thought it was really funny. Another one that it just exploded in my head. My daughter recommended this to me. It's called The Power, and it's framed as an archaeological look back to our times when suddenly women grow something that enables them to be more powerful than men. And it's a study of what would civilization be like if it was run by women, but women who had more physical power than men. So it's a very raw book, very raw. So, and by that I mean, some of the politics that are true in our world today have to do with sex, and one sex being able to overpower the other. And so that is examined. I'm trying to be delicate here. Another one I really love. This is another local author, Marcel's Letters, and she lives in White Bear Lake. She is a computer geek, and she found these beautiful letters in an antiquarian bookstore in Stillwater, which is no longer there, and bought them because she wanted to create a font. And after she'd had them for a while, she had them translated because they were French and she couldn't understand them. And then she got obsessed with trying to find out if the writer survived the war, because he was not exactly imprisoned by the Nazis, but he was a Frenchman who was transported to Germany to work for the Nazis. And she could tell that from the letters. It's just a fabulous read, a little bit of about obsession. And one of my book clubs read this, and she Zoomed with us. Mm-hmm. It's cool. And it doesn't fit any category of any book I've ever read, but it's just quirky. I'm trying to think. I already mentioned the Rosie Project. There's one called Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, which is about fictional Welsh orphanage. And it's based on a bunch of really odd pictures the writer found of Victorian children that the photographers were playing with photography to make it look like they were floating or make them, doing weird things. And he took the authors, Ransom Riggs, he took those ideas as if, what if children actually had these abilities and they had to be whisked away and the pictures are all through the book. It's just rogue and a fun romp. And a longtime favorite, which I'm not sure it fits quirky too much, but is Peace Like a River by Leif Anger. And this one's a family story, but it's got very much a faith story, and got some magical realism, which is unusual for a Midwestern writer. That's more Spanish and, Middle American. I can also go into some of my favorite classics if you want me to. I won't talk about them. I'll just list them.
Okay. Let's begin with listing a few of those because I would like to know. Okay.
Classics, of course, were the basis of my study for years, and also some of the things I taught. One of my most favorite American novels is My Antonia, by Willa Cather. And when I introduced this to my students one year, I had a young man raise his hand and say, "Miss Tammen, you really love this book, don't you?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, I do." And I didn't mean to be doing that, but it was just that kind of a thing. Yeah. I am a longtime fan of A Wrinkle in Time, as well as the whole series that follows, Wind in the Door and Slightly Tilting Planet, I think they are. British writer who I think is super underrated is Graham Greene. And The Power and the Glory is a story of a whiskey priest in the midst of a revolution, which is trying to destroy the Catholic Church. And it's a story of how God can use the weakest among us to do amazing things. And I love this book. Anna Green Gables, Canadian writer. Mark Twain said that Anne Shirley of Anna Green Gables was the best character created in fiction since my own Huck Finn. So Mark Twain liked it too. My daughter's named after her. I love the whole series. And so that's one of my favorite classics. Anything by C.S. Lewis. I have here Mere Christianity, which is a pretty dense read. Mm-hmm. But I love the Chronicles of Narnia and some of his other apologetics too. Now, ones I don't have copies of, Emma by Jane Austen. I love her wit. And I love, for our times right now, Antigone, the play by Sophocles. It's about tyranny and how and when and should it be fought. Another American writer that I love that I don't happen to have copies of is John Steinbeck, particularly Cannery Row, the short one, which is based on a man he knew. And of his long ones, I should be saying Grapes of Wrath, but I actually like East of Eden better. So that's my favorite. And finally, I guess Othello is my favorite Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah.
And lots of poets, too many to mention. So there's my blitz through.
You know, you have given myself and the audience so many suggestions, so many great ideas. And, you know, I think really, I know I need to expand a little bit and get out of my sort of same old, and maybe try to read some different things. So what you've said today has really inspired me to get busy, learn some new things.
And I was thinking about this, if I had a chance to say anything final, and I was going to say to people who like to read, one of the best things they can do is to find a reading buddy or a group. I mean, book clubs now are a dime a dozen, and we have 2 at the bookstore, but their libraries have them. And, you know, all it takes is 3 people, you know, or some of my friends who are grandparents read once a week with their grandchildren.
Oh,
and there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but especially if it's another reader and you have a reading buddy, sometimes it encourages you to do what you just said.
Yes.
Read something I would never in a million years have read The Soul of an Octopus if my book club hadn't been reading it. I thought, you got to be kidding me. I'll read it just so I know what you're talking about. And I read it twice. I loved it. Yeah, no lie. It's and Marcel's Letters is another one. I would never have read that except that somebody else found it and said, we should try this. And so I really recommend finding somebody else to talk it over with.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I do know there's a book club at my church. I haven't really gotten into it, but I guess I'm kind of like in a mood of, well, I need suggestions from people like you, because otherwise it's just by happenstance. I find what I like and read.
Well,
it.
And it's been fun to talk about books without a mask on.
Oh, yeah.
Because usually I have to have a mask on at the store.
Exactly. Oh, I have to say, I just know that in your retirement, this is so much fun for you to be that involved in
It's like
those
being in
kind
a
of
candy
things.
store.
Really. And, you know, for me, it's like singing in my choirs and doing a little accompanying, and that really feeds me. But, you know, that was all taken away. And it's almost been a year now.
I know.
So that's been really tough. But anyway, thank you for your wonderful, wonderful suggestions, your great listing of books. And I love to hear what your favorites are, because I know you as a person, and sometimes you surprise me what you're going to be reading. So thank you so much for coming on my show today. It's really about the arts, but you know what? I think reading and language arts are just as important as any of the other arts, including
Most
music.
writers consider themselves to be artists too.
I do, and I do too. I thank you again, Jill. It's been great talking to you today.
Thank you. It's been fun to be here.